Hi guys and girls, back with a new video, and apologies for the lateness of this one. I haven't long been back from America from my vacation, so only just been able to get back to where we were left off really before the Olympia. So it's been 2 weeks now since the 2019 Olympia happened, and as we know, this man, Mr. Brandon Curry, took the title this year. Now, I didn't predict that he'd win. I did think he'd be in the top three, but the judges went for him, and I give him full credit and congratulate him for doing so. He did bring a very good package to the show, and I think it's probably the best he's ever looked. However, I do have a few criticisms on his physique, particularly his midsection. It was quite distended in my opinion. I felt he didn't have very good control of his abs. It looked like a bubble gut at times, personally. And well, when you look at the other guys who are in the top three and top five even, I felt like they had much better control of that area and looked far more aesthetic, particularly with conditioning as well. Hadi Choopan was one in particular I felt had amazing abs, and I'll get onto that later in the video. But as you see, Brandon had a very good posing routine. He is quite good at posing, I will give him credit, and he had tremendous size, as you can see. Very good conditioning overall. I will still say that I feel he is quite top heavy. His legs are big, and that's definitely obvious. But I think because he's so big on the upper body, it just makes them look a bit smaller. So in my opinion, not so proportionate there. I feel there's not as good of a balance with symmetry in his physique. However, overall, he has, fantastic shoulders, arms are huge, his back is very, very good. And overall, you can't really fault him. Like I said, it's just two minor things for me. I feel like his legs could come up a bit more, and I feel like he needs to have better control of his abs and make them flatter. Perhaps try and a vacuum, but as we know, in the open, they don't like to do vacuums. It's only really in the men's classic that the guys will do that. But nonetheless, well done to Brandon. I'm sure you are over the moon and can't wait for competitions coming up next year, and obviously next year's 2020 Mr. Olympia. Now, I haven't got time in this video to talk about every person, every placing, but I am going to be focusing on the top three. And as you see, the top three were Hadi Choopan in third, William Bonac in second, and obviously Brandon Curry in first. Now, there was a lot of controversy, or shall I say disappointment, from the audience and fans of Hadi. It was his first year ever competing in America at such a big competition. As I said in the previous video, and as we all know, he's been trying to get into America for years, and because he's Iranian, unfortunately, I think there's a bit of a stigma attached to him from where he's from, and he couldn't get the right visa to get into the country. So sadly, even though he qualified a few years before, he's just been unable to. But he did amazing to be in his first ever competition here, as kind of not an underdog, but someone who wasn't expected to be seen as a threat for the title, or even to place as high as he did. He came in top three. He got that call out, and I think he deserves it. If you're looking at this comparison here between the three of them, I would say 100% he has far better conditioning than William and Brandon, particularly his control of his midsection, and his abs very, very good. He really did bring the conditioning in. But for someone of his stature, like his size and height, similar to William, he just has so much muscle in that tiny frame, and it's completely bone dry. He wasn't puffy, he wasn't flat, he was hard, he had striations, he had vascularity, but not too much. The cuts and shreds were there, and he was deserving of being put in this top three. Now, I don't obviously discredit William for coming second. He's done really well from where he came from a couple of years ago in Olympia at his top position being 3. Now he's obviously come in at 2, so well done to him. But again, looking at these guys from the back, I mean, if you just look at Hadi's back, it's just phenomenal. It's so wide, and it's just very, very well conditioned, and he's got very big arms, very much like the other two. He definitely has big arms for his size, and I think he's got very good genetics, to be honest. Again, looking at the posing here, they're fairly equally matched, but when you see the lat spread, I mean, looking at Hardy's lat spread, it reminds me of Franco Columbu, actually, the late, great Franco Columbu, may I add, God rest his soul, with that Cobra effect, you know, really wide, thick lats, and they insert very low. Now, that's a genetic thing. A lot of men don't have low lat insertion points generally. I find that with black athletes, they tend to have better lat insertion points than white athletes, or perhaps Middle Eastern or European. But with Hardy, that's not the case. You know, he's got fantastic lat insertion points, very low, very thick, and very wide. Again, with his legs, I mean, I've obviously mentioned previously about Brandon. I think Hardy's legs are better here as well. I think they're much wider, particularly in the outer sweeps. They're very, very wide, separate to his teardrop. Looking at the three of them together, hitting the legs, the leg poses. I mean, they've all got very good legs. And Brandon, well, I did say before that his legs aren't as big as his upper body. You know, looking at these photos here, you can kind of see that a bit. But you just look at Hardy again, look how much wider and thicker they are from the outer sweeps. I just think they're far more impressive. But I'm interested to see what you guys think about the comparisons here in the videos and pictures. What way round would you have thought it should have gone? For me personally, looking at this, it's I'd say Hardy first, Brandon second, and William third. Now, moving on to William Bonac, your top two finisher. Now, William, as I mentioned just a moment ago, he did place third in 2017, and obviously this year he's gone up a notch. Now, some people are saying this competition is probably the most boring and less competitive of many years. Now, there is truth to that. There aren't, obviously, the last year's champion Shawn Rhoden wasn't there. Phil Heath, 7 times Mr. Olympia, wasn't there. But I'll be honest with you, we need new people and new blood in the sport. It gets boring, in my opinion, to have the same people winning it year on year. It's impressive, no doubt about that, as from looking from a sports perspective of an athlete. However, everyone has their time, and it's time for new people. Now, I don't know how long each of these athletes, like the top 10, will be in this. Some of them much older than others. For example, Dexter Jackson and Cedric McMillan. However, I think William's still got a good few years on him, and you know, he's got really good genetics, he's got a fantastic physique. He also coached himself for this competition. You know, he dropped his coach this year, they had a fallout, and to get in second place Mr. Olympia on your own with no coaching, no training, just all on your own, is a very, very impressive feat. And you know, you've got to give the man credit for that, because a lot of athletes do rely on their coaches and their support teams and the nutritionists and whatnot. Now, he took all that on his own, plus doing everything else in his daily life. So, you know, well done, Will. Like, I rate that big time, because that's certainly not an easy thing to do. There are some athletes in history who were able to do that, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but you know, not many do succeed. They rely heavily on their support, as I said. But, you know, looking at Will's posing routine, I think it's really good. You know, he got the crowd going. They really like him. He's definitely not a hated or boring athlete. He's definitely got a good name in the sport, and he's well respected and well known. And even more so now that he's come second. Would he have been second if some of the other guys I mentioned were in it this year? Shawn, Phil, maybe even Big Ramy, if he'd been better conditioned? I think he'd have been a top 5. I wouldn't have put him in top 3 if they were there. But again, as we know with Shawn and Phil, they could have come off this year if they both competed. No one knows until the day. And unfortunately, as I haven't mentioned, you know, my top guy, Rolly, he came 5th this year, and everyone's saying it's because of conditioning. So, last but not least, Mr. Hadi Choopan, your top 3 finisher and also the People's Champion. Now, as I mentioned a bit earlier, the fans in the crowd and the audience were not happy with his placing. And, you know, when I made my previous video, I had high hopes for him, but I also didn't think he'd finish as high as he did, to be honest. And I was very surprised to see his physique. Obviously, I've seen his workout videos and I've checked him out, but I didn't think he had what it took to be as high as he did. But when he came on stage, I mean, look at the guy, he's just shredded to the bone. and he's got so much muscle on that tiny frame. It's just, he can't get any more on there. It's not possible. So I would completely agree that he's deserving of a top three finish and also the People's Champion. It's no shadow of a doubt that he's not deserving. However, I do think that he had a very, very fine, it wasn't very fair that he was put in number three. I feel that he did amazing to get there for his first ever show, but he was at least deserving of two. Now, I don't know if it's politics, a slight bit of bias, because he's a newcomer, he's not American, there's been past difficulties in him coming in. We don't know, it's all speculation. I would personally say, from my opinion, I felt like there's a little bit of politics there, a little bit of unfair decisions from the judges. I could be wrong, but that's just what I think. But nonetheless, he's qualified again for next year. He was number three. He also has made a name for himself. He's a newcomer, but I think now he's someone to contend with for the future, and I can't see him going anywhere soon. The guy definitely, as I said, is deserving of that title. Third placing. So well done, Hadi, and I can't wait to see how you get on in the future. So I will be making a couple more videos because obviously I've not been able to discuss the other guys who placed 4th, 5th and up to 10th, and also just my opinions and views on some newcomers separate to Hadi. So please stay tuned and make sure you keep liking, subscribing and sharing my videos if you do. Appreciate any comments could be left below about what your thoughts are on the video and also about the top three finishers, and stay tuned for the future videos where I'll be discussing more on Olympia, far in depth, for the likes of Rolly, Luke Sando, and obviously the other guys who didn't compete, and some placings that we found obviously to be a surprise. So until then, guys, please do check me on Instagram as well if you could, Amigo1 Fitness, and until then, signing out.